I'm going to show you how to replace a turbo in a 2.5 XT Outback. I believe it's the same turbo in the Forester and also the Legacy GT from this vintage. This car has 119,000 miles on it. This is the VF40 Turbo. These turbos, can last if you change your oil frequently and clean out your Banjo bolts or remove the screens. And if you need to find out what Banjo bolts are, you should do some Google searching on that. We've determined that this car's Banjo bolt screens were already removed, so for whatever reason this turbo has failed. We're going to replace it. There's a couple things to unbolt. It's a fairly easy job. It's just parts changing. So you need to unbolt, take off your engine cover, and then you need to unbolt your intercooler. Okay, you can start on this side. These are 12mm bolts. You got two of those. You have one in the back, also a 12mm. that you'll need to remove. There's a clamp for the air exchange right here. And there's a little 8mm bolt you can unscrew there, and then this clamp right here you'll have to take off, and then I believe this hose. And this whole thing is just going to come right out. Okay, that's the first step. Okay, we've got our intercooler off, and I just wanted to show you the top of the turbo here. You disconnect this line. This is one of the coolant lines, okay, for the turbo. And if you disconnect this, you have a bracket that we're going to have to take off later. It's not on the new turbo. And it includes this little screw down here, and then it's going to bolt down here on the side. So we'll just leave that on there because it's going to come off as a unit. So next steps, you can go a couple different ways. I'm going to take off this heat shield. There should be 4 or 5 bolts. I think this car only has 3 good ones left, but it's very solid, so that's okay if yours is like that. And you can undo, there's a oil line right here. We're going to need to take that bolt out, and then this bracket's going to come off. So those are some of our next steps. We'll follow up here on step 3. Okay, on the heat shield, all the bolts are 10mm. There are actually supposed to be, there's 2. You can see there's the one there on the top. There's 2 right there, and there's only 1 on this heat shield. The other one's missing. Okay, there's 1 on the back side, and then there are 2. There's 1 right there on the top. I've already removed that one, and then there's another one on this side. But this car only has 3 of its 5. So you'll have 5 total if your car still has all of its pieces, parts. If not, you have, well, whatever you have as long as it's solid. Just take out those 10mm bolts, and we'll continue next step. Okay, we're still unbolting the turbo up top. I just wanted to show you where we're at. Kind of, this is a parallel view. Here's the front of the car. Okay, this is exactly how it looks like in the car in terms of its position. The bolts that I've removed, there are 3 nuts here that you can get to pretty much from the top. This one you can do from the top and the back. You'll have to remove these 2 bolts, and they're all right here. They're all 14mm. Okay. If you spray them down with some penetrant, they'll come right out. This bracket goes right here. This is the thing that holds on that heat shield. I'm sorry, it goes like that. Holds on the heat shield that we previously took off, and I will show you what that looks like up top here in a second. This is the next piece that you have to remove to get the exhaust off the back of the turbo, and let me show you where this is. See, this little thing is going to hold you back unless you can get it off, and it sits right here. There's one 14mm bolt. Again, you're going to have to soak that down to get it out, but if you just loosen that, it's not going to let you pull it out because this little lip is here. So what you have to do is those 2 correspond to 2 studs that are on the back of the transmission. Okay, one you can get with a wrench, the other one you're going to have to get with an extension and a 3/8 inch drive ratchet. Okay, they should come off pretty easily. They did for me. I didn't have to use a breaker bar or anything. Well, on the wrench I did. But once you get that bracket out, this will be free, and then all you have to do is just kind of gently wiggle it back, and it'll break loose. And then that way we can get to the bottom bolts on our turbo, which are going to be these ones right here. Okay, here we are back on the top here. You can see that the exhaust now is just dangling there, kind of off the back of the turbo. This way we're allowed to pull the gasket back, which is right here, okay? And then we can get to that one bolt down there so we can get the bottom out, and then there are two more. On this side, I have the socket here on the back one. We're going to take those 3 bolts off, and then we'll move on to the next thing. Okay, this baby's just about ready to come out. I want to bring you up to speed. We've removed our 3 nuts that are holding on the turbo on the bottom. I undid, here's the oil line on the top here. That was a 12 millimeter bolt. You loosen that, and then you just, with a 15 millimeter, you just very carefully break loose this line here, and then you can move that out of the way. There's a 10 millimeter bolt here on the top we discussed earlier. We already had our coolant line released up here. Now, before I did this lower coolant line, I drained some of the coolant out underneath the radiator, and the reason being is I don't want coolant going down our exhaust pipe. Just not something you want to clean up and have that issue. So we're going to take it out here in a second. There is the bolt, you can kind of see it there, the end of the flashlight is a 10 millimeter, and that's the inlet air, okay, and you need to release that also. So it's about ready to come out. After a little bit of wrangling, we got the turbo out. So here's the top front, okay, this is the way it was sitting in the car like that. I forgot to mention, there is one other coolant line that is underneath, okay. When you get the new or remanufactured turbo, they're going to give you a gasket for this coolant flange here, and then 6 copper things, or washers, I'm sorry. And those are for the coolant lines, 4 for these 2, and then 2 for the oil line on the top, okay. This turbo is bad for sure, and you can look in here. There's a lot of play side to side on the shaft, and then more importantly, the really bad thing is that it goes in and out, and you don't want it to be able to go in and out. A tiny bit of play side to side is, still okay, but I mean, this thing's all over the place, so it's bad. So we know we have a bad part. We're going to put the new one in. This thing came off really easily, so I'm going to put a new clamp on here. I would advise, if you have some weak clamps that, that look like that, it looks like it's from a Model T, get the real thing and put it back together with the best parts possible. Just wanted to show you what a Banjo Bolt looks like. There are actually multiple on these 2.5 turbo motors, and this is the one that is closest to the turbo and is the most immediate in the oil feed line. It's the oil feed line that comes up over the top, which we unbolted. Remember this one right here? Okay. So here's the top of that line. It goes on the top of the turbo, and then right there is where the bolt comes out of. You can access that and take it out, and I would recommend that you do if the screen is still installed. The technical service bulletin from Subaru says, to my understanding, that you are supposed to remove the screen because it restricts the oil flow. Here's what the screen looks like. I pulled it out, it's all chewed up. But that's what they look like, and they really inhibit, and they get clogged up, and they can inhibit the oil flow. There are multiple ones on this car. I said earlier in this this turbo removal process that they have been removed, and all the ones that are easily accessible had. This one had not, so this may have been the culprit. So okay, we're gonna change over the old parts that we're gonna be reusing, mostly the hoses, the coolant lines. There's a vacuum line, and in the kit that we got here, like I said earlier, we get the gasket for the bottom coolant flange, and then these copper crush washers. And make sure you use the larger ones, the only ones that are going to fit on your coolant line. So I've already put on this new line here. That little guy right there, that bolt is a T30, okay? You're going to need one of those sockets to take out the screw on the top right there, and then the one on the back side right there for the lower coolant line. Okay, the turbo's about ready to go back in, but I wanted to show you, this is the tube from the airbox, and this is the inlet that goes into the turbo. And this is one of those cases where I think a previous repair resulted in a part that wasn't replaced. And look at this big split, and this thing's all gummy here. This is from a previous turbo failure, and it looks like it's got really hot. So here's the new tube. I've already fished it back in there. This took quite a while for us to get back underneath this intake. You have to be very patient. There are, you can see, 1, 2, 3. There's one big one in the back, and then there's this sensor that unclips here in the back. You have to be very careful if you have to do this tube. There's a clip back here. That's for that one on the top, right there. And there's a hose, underneath here. You have to get all these clamps off. This goes right in here where that electronic connector is, and then there's a hose there. That hose has one of these style clamps. You have to stick a screwdriver in there and spread it open. So it's just a matter of patience, really. So we're gonna get that tube reconnected, and we'll pick up from there. Okay, we got the turbo just setting in there. It's not obviously bolted in anyway because it's just hanging out. We got that tube in, which was very difficult. Okay, so if you do have to replace that tube, be very patient. There's a bunch of hoses under there that you have to disconnect. If you don't have a lot of experience with clamps and all that, you're going to need some help. But if you've gotten this far, you probably have done something enough with cars before that you're confident enough that you can complete your job, and I hope so. You just have to be patient with some of this more difficult stuff. This is probably the hardest part, getting this back in the tube here, in the inlet, and then also this tube here in the bottom. I mentioned previously I thought it was a coolant line, but actually it appears to be an oil tube. And that goes, there's a tube way down there. Those all have to slide in together. It's kind of like docking something with a space shuttle. Okay, we're all done with the turbo. The engine cover is back on. Just kind of want to bring you up to speed. The last we saw was the turbo just setting in there, and we had to get that tube in the bottom. It took a long time to get that lined up. I had to pull it in and out twice to get that bottom tube lined up there in the bottom. The looks like the oil return line. And then the inlet tube, you have to be very careful you don't puncture it if you're going around with a screwdriver and trying to open it up enough to let the inlet slide over the front of that turbo. But once you get everything connected, obviously check for any leaks. Make sure you put oil back in the motor and all that kind of stuff, and top your coolant back off and all that. Just be very careful with the plastic clips because those can add up. This car was missing 4 of the engine cover clips, so it's a couple bucks here and there. But if you break them, it's kind of obnoxious to have to go over and get them again. So I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, I can try to answer. The best thing that you can do is look on the Subaru Outback forums for any things that I may have missed. And wish you the best in doing your own work and saving a lot of money.